From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thanks for joining us tonight. Here's what's coming up. Brexit prerequisite. Theresa May forced to ask for a Brexit extension. But what will Brussels demand in return? Unwavering ally, the Taoiseach hosts German Chancellor Angela Merkel as anxiety over no-deal mounts. I'm sorry, Belgium apologises for human rights abuses during its colonial rule in the Congo. Unite the Front, Marine Le Pen on her ambitions for a nationalist alliance in the European Parliament. And classic Tusk, the EU Council President, celebrates 1 million Twitter followers in typical Donald Tusk fashion. A very good evening and welcome to the programme. First, it's time to meet our panellists. First up is Maija-Petra Kumpula-Natri, who is a Finnish MEP with the Socialist and Democrats groups. Good evening, Maija-Petra. What are you looking at tonight?
I'm following with the interest the European Parliament elections ahead, and then if the nationalistic right wants to be more united, and at the same time they are kind of working to break the union that we have.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and we will be looking at that a little bit later. Also joining us is William Dartmouth. He is a British MEP with the Europe of Freedom and Democracy groups. What about you, William?
Good evening. Yes, I'm watching the meeting between the Irish Taoiseach and Chancellor Merkel. I think the Irish Taoiseach fears that he may have overplayed his hand, and then he's going to Chancellor Merkel to ensure that he gets an EU job if things, for himself, if things go badly wrong.
And Nina Gill, who's been shaking her head during that, is a British MEP with the Socialist and Democrats group. What about you, Nina?
Of course, the Brexit saga as it unfolds. What next? So, watching Brexit and
Indeed,
what happens next.
Every twist and turn, and that is where we begin yet again tonight. There was a rare event in the House of Commons last night. There was a vote on Brexit, and it passed. Now, admittedly, it was just by one vote, but a majority of MPs agreed to force Theresa May to ask the EU for an extension to avoid a no deal. Now, Theresa May would prefer her deal and is still in talks with the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, to find a compromise. But the government's anger at having its hand forced in asking for an extension was plain to see. Here's what the UK's Brexit Secretary, Stephen Barclay, had to say.
It should be clear to all members of this House that asking the public to hold elections for an organisation we are meant to have left would damage trust in politics. However, there is no guarantee the UK will not participate in European parliamentary elections if the House refuses to support a deal.
Well, we're joined now from London by our UK correspondent, Vincent McAviney, who is there. Good evening, Vincent. Yesterday we were talking about these talks between Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May. They were described as constructive last night. How has day two gone? Are we still looking at constructive compromise?
Good evening, Darren. Well, before we get to that, just to talk about how Parliament is broken, we've been saying it for weeks, quite literally today it is. So at that end of the building, the House of Lords are now trying to filibuster what the House of Commons voted for last night and block it going through, even though they're an unelected chamber. And at this end in the House of Commons, well, the ceiling has literally fallen in. A sewage pipe has burst and the chamber has been flooded with some pretty nasty stuff. So the MPs have had to give up chatting in there for the day. So making it easy for us journalists to get all the metaphors in about how this place simply is not working. But on those discussions themselves, the teams that the Prime Minister and Jeremy Corbyn have put together of some of their cabinet secretaries and shadow secretaries and their staff are meeting again today. We understand that at last night's meeting, whilst the Prime Minister said, via her spokesperson, that she welcomed the meeting, it had been flexible and good, the Jeremy Corbyn's spokesperson said that they hadn't actually had as much of a move from the Prime Minister as expected. Jeremy Corbyn put out an interview in which he said that he needed the Prime Minister to walk back from her red lines. They needed a customs union. They needed to rethink immigration plans. And also, he is considering having that public vote as something that's necessary for whatever they come up with. So their staffs will continue to meet today. I think it's going to take a couple more days, though, as they do a bit of a careful choreographed dance to make sure that they both look like they've negotiated as hard as possible ahead of coming up with some kind of compromise to take to the EU at that council meeting next week.
Vincent McAviney for us there in London. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nina, let's start with you, because Jeremy Corbyn is now a key part of this process, isn't he? But Labour are so divided. We've got one group of MPs telling to accept Theresa May's deal and not have a second referendum, and another saying that he couldn't accept any deal if a second referendum wasn't attached.
We're not as divided as the Tory party.
Well,
I mean, yes, we have small divisions.
Close.
We have people who are not completely convinced about having either a second referendum or people's vote. But overall, there is generally very close to majority in terms of customs union or customs union 2.0. You know, there was a majority of Labour members, they supported that. And I think, you know, we can find a way through this if Mrs May actually, you know, loosens her red lines somewhat. The red lines are the problem. So I don't accept that Labour is as divided as the Tories.
Okay, well, you tell me here and now, does Labour want to see a second referendum? Yes or no?
It's party policy. It was agreed last year in
25
conference.
25 Labour MPs have written to Jeremy Corbyn this afternoon saying they do not want him to agree to a deal that has a second referendum attached.
I accept that, but there are many more who actually have written to Jeremy Corbyn and said we do want a second referendum. So I would say majority of the members of the Labour Party do want another vote on whatever the deal is, that there has to be some kind of confirmatory vote. Don't call it second referendum, you know, call it a confirmatory vote, just to understand, because you can see how divided the country is. What we are reflecting is the fact that the country is totally divided, so the Parliament's totally divided as to what is the best way forward. And the blame for all of this lies with the Brexiters, who didn't think of any solutions. They had no plan, and they've left it to everybody else to sort it out.
Let's put that to William. Is it the Brexiteers' fault?
No. There's about 160 Brexiteers in a House of Commons of 652, I think it is. And the fact of the matter is that the Remain majority have done everything that they possibly can, in order to frustrate the first referendum. Now, all this talk about the second referendum, which I didn't realise it was officially Labour Party policy, because that's very interesting.
We've agreed on a public vote.
This is simply designed to overturn the result. But in this context of referendums, is this like women's tennis, where it's best of 3 sets, or men's tennis, where it's best of 5 sets? Do we go on and on and on and having referendums until people like yourselves actually get the result that you want? I think that that's not very straightforward.
I'm sorry, you're putting votes over and over again.
Let's bring in my Petra. It's maybe you don't want to see an extension. You don't want to see this carrying on for years to come, do you?
For the Finnish presidency starting the 1st of July, I'm prepared for everything, probably in this house. No, but it's a sad situation to see how much political credibility one country, one great nation can lose in a short time. This is how it looks from this side of channel, that Parliament cannot vote any yes votes, yes one, to avoid a hard Brexit. And that was a great news after many, many votes, because there's no winner on that situation. It's a lose for UK, for even Brexiters, if you look at the economy, how it's developing and responding for this one. So that's why I'm personally, and I think there is modest opinion in the union side, that yes, we want UK to help decide what is your outcome from the tricky situation. And I'm always in favour of democracy. Do not be afraid of using the people's vote when the Parliament is stuck in one situation.
And then should we have a third one to decide, in case it's an equal? And also,
if the Parliament
would the Remainers accept the vote of a second referendum if
there is proper solution then in the Parliament is now saying no, not the European Union, and that's why it really should remain on the UK to decide what they want from here. Yes, if there is a long extension with some good steps to be taken, yes, of course, EU have to respond to that wish. But then at the same time saying that it's 5th time Theresa May deal, that's not serious anymore.
On this idea of an extension, though, I mean, we are looking at like it. Is the Labour Party starting to get candidates in place? Are you potentially going to run again?
Well, let's wait and see what happens on the 12th of April first. I mean, we have to get through 2 hurdles. We have to see what kind of deal or agreement, you know, is reached between Labour and the government. And secondly, we have to see as to what sort of extension we get. You know, talks here are 9 months to a year. That is what the EU would be prepared. And frankly, at the moment, the government is saying we don't want that. We still want to leave on the 22nd of May. So it's very hard for me to speculate about European elections when we have no clarity as to what happens at the next European Council. And I think, you know, also there's talk of some sort of conditions.
Well, precisely.
You know.
I mean, how would that go down if there are these conditions, potentially of a second referendum, of a general election, of not being able to fully take part? How will that go down in the UK?
Well, I think very, very badly. I mean, the reason why there's talk of a long extension, and please note that's what's been said, is because a large number of the 27 member states, I should say, want the UK to stay in. One of the reasons is because we are a massive net contributor. Don't forget, there are 17 member states that receive money, of whom Finland is not one, and 11 that pay money. If you lose the second biggest contributor, it's really rather serious.
But I get the impression, though, that yes, there is goodwill towards the UK, but that is ebbing away because people are really frustrated with this Brexit process.
There is a time, and that's the time deadline is that we need this parliament to work. But then talking about the economy and size, there are more and more Britons who even voted Brexit in their feelings that now see the result, what would it be? And then think about it, this machinery, EU, called EU, as a tool, in a global GNB, how much is it? More than 20%. More than 20% in our hands of the national gross production. It's in EU, in our hands.
Yeah.
What do you do with this great example?
It'll be 15% without the UK.
3%.
You are completely delusional. They do not need us that much.
I didn't say
they are not desperate for us to stay. What I'm picking up are member states are very mixed. They want to help us facilitate. We are the ones who've created this mess for ourselves, and we have no solution.
Well, I'm opposed to an extension.
Problem. It's not their problem.
I'm opposed to an extension.
We're not going to extend this discussion any further. We're going to bring to an end there. But thank you very much indeed for the time being, because we're not moving away from Brexit, because we know, as I said at the top of the programme, that the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, has said she will fight to the last minute to avoid a hard Brexit. But is she fighting enough? Well, today she travelled to the place that would be hit hardest by a no-deal Brexit, the island of Ireland, and she met with the leader there, Leo Varadkar, in Dublin this afternoon. Angela Merkel wanted to see for herself the damage a no-deal Brexit could cause and kept searching for a solution that might prevent a hard border. Meanwhile, as we keep talking about on this issue of a no-deal Brexit, whether it is now increasingly likely, as the European Commission insists, well, I put that very question to them today, given the fact that the UK Parliament seems to have ruled it out. And this was their response to that question. I don't understand how a no-deal Brexit is now highly or very likely, given the fact that the British Prime Minister has ruled it out and Parliament has repeatedly done so in the UK. So is it that you just don't trust what the Prime Minister says anymore? Is it, something that we don't, that another EU country might veto an extension next week? Or is it simply just scaremongering on behalf of the Commission, a bit like these briefings we've had this week?
There are two scenarios. One is this scenario with a deal, with a withdrawal agreement, and then there's one without. And that's where we are. The withdrawal agreement is on the table. We very much hope that it will be ratified, but that is now a process which is in the hands of the UK.
Well, there you go. That was their response for them. We're joined alongside William and Nina by Sean Kelly, who is with the EPP party here in the European Parliament, and of course from Ireland himself. Angela Merkel is in Dublin today. What do you think she's trying to achieve with her visit? Why is she there at this crucial moment?
Well, of course, she hasn't been there for 5 years, so I think she's coming in solidarity with Ireland in the position that they're in. I think saying that they're going to stand behind the withdrawal agreement and the European Union's position. And also, I would say, exploring, if the worst came to the worst, what would be the position in relation to a hard border. But I think primarily she's coming in solidarity and she's most welcome.
But this is what I can understand, though. So we're told that there will be no hard border if there's a deal, and there will be no hard border if there isn't a deal.
Yes.
Isn't that everyone accuses the British of having their cake and eating it. To me, that sounds like the Irish having their cake and eating it.
No, I mean, we have been very consistent from the outset, and we are taking the interests of both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland into consideration and representing them. And that has been seen in the European Union, in the negotiations conducted by Michel Barnier. We all want to avoid a hard border, and I think while Angela Merkel's visit was planned some time ago, as the days go by, I think the idea that we will have a hard border, I think, is lessening by the day. Because if you look at the votes in the House of Commons, they're becoming less and less extreme. So I think you're going to have a Brexit or no hard border.
On this point, William, that I put to the Commission, how do they say that it is very likely or more than likely now that there will be a Brexit crash out when the Prime Minister and the British Parliament have essentially ruled it out?
Well, I think that you made to be a bit sycophantic, rather unusually for me. I think you asked a great question, and it actually wasn't properly answered. But if we can go back to the question of the border, and I'm a tremendous admirer of everything he's done here for the last 10 years, is that there's no way that the government of the Republic of Ireland is going to put on a hard border. And the UK won't put on a hard border. Whatever the result is, there is not going to be a hard border.
So why the need for the backstop?
Well, that's exactly the point. That's the key point. There's no need for the backstop. It's a brilliant invention of Michel Barnier, who's been a brilliant negotiator and has run rings round the completely inadequate UK negotiator and inadequate UK Prime Minister. That's my view, anyway.
Well, I mean, clearly, you know, Labour's policy's always been that we do not want any hard border there. And I think most people that I've spoken to from Northern Ireland, colleagues and others, say, look, you know, if we had a hard border, that will completely undermine the Good Friday Agreement. And the problem is that none of these issues were ever examined and talked about by the Brexiters as to what is the solution. It is quite clear that if the UK is not part of the EU, we leave the customs union single market, there does need to be a border somewhere, you know. Either we stay in or in customs union and align with the single market, or there has to be some kind of checks and balances. Well, nobody has come up with a proposal that gives you as to how you get out of this situation.
Isn't that the question, Sean Kelly, is that we are apparently just over a week away from a very likely scenario, according to the European Union, which is Britain's going to leave with no deal. And you guys and the Irish and the European Commission have still not worked out a way of protecting the integrity of the single market and avoiding a hard border.
Well, I don't think...
In 8 days?
I don't think it's likely they're going to crash out in 8 days. I think the opposite is the case.
Then why do you think the European Union keeps saying it is a very likely scenario?
Well, I disagree with him that it's a possibility, but not a very likely scenario. And I think the likelihood of it happening is becoming less and less by the day. But, of course, you have to plan for all eventualities. And in that situation, you are right, we would have to look at what would be the position to avoid a hard border to preserve the Good Friday Agreement, as Nina says, but at the same time to protect the single market. And that would have to be worked out. And while you could do it to a certain amount with technology and so forth, you'd also have to look at illegitimate business, because you can do technology with legitimate business. But if you had a situation where you had no controls at all, that would encourage smuggling, and that would have to be monitored and dealt with in some way. So it's not simplistic. So for the main reason here is to avoid a hard border and to give the British the time and space to do so, and they're moving in that direction.
Guys, thank you very much indeed, Sean Kelly, William Dartmouth and Nita Gill. It's going to be an interesting discussion and one that is likely to carry on for days to come, but we've got that crucial Emergency EU Council Summit pencilled in for next Wednesday. We'll see what comes from that. Now, turning away from Brexit, you may be glad to know, and for a bit of fun, as presidential elections go, Ukraine has been full of surprises, and now the stage is set for a televised debate of epic proportions. Alex Morgan and our team at theCUBE in Euronews headquarters have been following all the drama. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Darren. Well, you thought Brexit was bizarre. Check this out for a presidential confrontation, the likes of which, well, the scale of which we certainly have not seen. This is This is a story about two men, one the incumbent president and another, a political outsider who plays a president on TV. He is Volodymyr Zelensky, and he has challenged the incumbent Petro Poroshenko to a debate in the Olympic Stadium. And now the incumbent president has responded. But look at the way they've done it. These are the videos. We've put them back to back for you here. Let's have a watch.
Чекаю на вас тут, на НСК Олімпійський.
Дебати – це не шоу.
Даю вам 24 години. Думайте.
Стадіон так стадіон. Я чекаю на вас, Володимир Олександрович.
Two highly produced videos, the men saying, yeah, we'll face off. Where are they facing off? They're facing off in the Olympic Stadium, Darren, that seats 70,000 people. And there was a stipulation that if this was going to go ahead, Mr. Zelensky wanted both men to undertake a drugs test because he said Ukraine deserved to have a fit and healthy president. Another challenge to Petro Poroshenko. Well, as you can see, Petro Poroshenko has accepted these challenges, even putting on his Facebook page saying, yes, 9 a.m. tomorrow, that is Friday, I'm going to be there submitting my samples. In fact, we are talking to Petro Poroshenko's campaign to get media accreditation. They're letting journalists come along to watch this. Mr. Zelensky, are you going to come and do the drugs test too? That's the challenge from Petro Poroshenko. It feels like a TV drama. The videos look like they're from a TV drama. And all of this is happening because in the first round, there was no outright winner. Second round's coming up on April the 12th. So how is Ukraine responding to this really extraordinary showdown between these two men? Well, a leading opera star has said, yeah, I'll come along. I'll sing the national anthem for you at this stadium that seats 70,000. We know the national police as well saying, all right, we're up for it. We'll provide you the security. Whether or not people are going to turn up, we haven't got an exact date for the debate. That is yet to be seen. Stay with us on Euronews, though. We are all over this story. But I think what's crucial is we spoke to ordinary Ukrainians, asking those contacting us on Facebook what they had to make about all of this. Let's just bring you one of the voices sent to us here at Euronews.
Hi. In my opinion, debates are absolutely necessary, especially today when we have two candidates and one of them is absolutely unknown, who was able to turn his popularity of a showman, of an actor, into political points. So people have to know better their candidates, and that's why we absolutely need these debates.
So that's Artur there. He is in Ukraine. We absolutely need these debates. We've got the drug test tomorrow. Will the men turn up? We are yet to see. Stay with us on Euronews for all the drama, Darren.
Alex in Lyon, thank you very much indeed for joining us. This is extraordinary stuff, isn't it? It sounds almost like a schoolyard fight, though, in many regards.
I think it's absolutely compelling and fascinating. I only wish I could be in the audience, actually.
Well, it just shows the power of media. You know, he's a TV star and he's coming up with novel ways of challenging the way we do politics.
Well, isn't that also the interesting thing, just finally, Sean, is that, you know, time and time again, we are seeing kind of these norm politicians doing remarkably well in elections.
Yes, and I suppose Donald Trump is the primary example of it, a person with no involvement in politics, and he becomes the leader of the greatest power in the world. So definitely, it's something that you can create momentum very quickly through the media now and get people behind you in a way you couldn't have done before.
You were choosing your words about Donald Trump very carefully there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on Raw Politics, but coming up, Belgium apologises for human rights abuses during its colonial rule. But what will achieve that debate next? Plus, high hopes. Marine Le Pen says her party will triumph in the European Parliament elections. But can she unite the far right? Stay tuned to Raw Politics. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, the Belgian Prime Minister, Charles Michel, today apologised for the kidnapping, segregation and deportation of hundreds of mixed-race children born during Belgium's colonial rule in the Congo, Rwanda and Brunei. This comes months after the UN called on the country to confront its colonial past and tackle present-day racism, though today's apology does not go far enough as what the UN outlined. This is what Charles Michel had to say.
Au nom du gouvernement fédéral, je reconnais la ségrégation ciblée dont les métis ont été victimes sous l'administration coloniale du Congo belge et du Rwanda au Burundi jusqu'en 1962 et suite à la décolonisation, ainsi que la politique d'enlèvement forcé y afférente. Au nom du gouvernement fédéral belge, je présente mes excuses aux métis issus de la colonisation belge et à leurs familles pour les injustices et les souffrances qu'ils ont subies.
Well, now, joining me to discuss this, we've got Elaine de Brucalara from the Belgium Métis Association, who's a co-founder of that, I should say, but also whose mother was one of the many children brought to Belgium. We've also got the Belgium MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformists, Mark Dimmersmarker, and also the communications expert and managing director of Red Thread Communications, Laura Shields. Thank you all indeed for joining us. Let's start with you, Elaine. How significant do you think today was?
It is significant. It was on the books for quite some time already that it would happen today. It is significant, but I believe it's only significant if real consequences are connected to these apologies. And as what I've heard as of now, that's not clear yet.
What real consequences would you like to see? What real consequences?
Well, there are still people whose nationality situation, their papers, their administration is not in order. So for people who arrived here, who were brought here by the Belgian government, their nationality status was quite complex, and that still hasn't been brought into the light as much and hasn't been arranged. So that's kind of a form of reorganizing that kind of a thing. And then at the other end, what is very important is that we want a panel commission of experts that will look at all these different situations, all these different things of discrimination, what happened, where are we now, and put them all together and see what we can do.
How significant do you view today? The right move, do you think?
Yes, it's the right thing to do for now, but it's part of the greater story for me. We should have a look, and I mean, as a community, we should be able to express a common statement and judgment on what we did as a community in the past. During the whole period, starting from the Congo Free State under the former king, Leopold II, and then afterwards during the Belgian colonial period. We should come to terms with that. And the truth should be known and should be educated.
And that has to go beyond apologies, doesn't it?
Yes, apologies. And what Helene says is very true. If there are any inequalities still or discriminations still, this should be addressed right now.
I think it's very clear that there is still inequality in Belgium on a high level. There was a report by the King Baudouin Foundation that did say that, for example, the Congolese community is the highest educated community in Belgium, but has a lower working rate. So, I mean, they're 4 times more likely to be unemployed. There are many, many studies that prove that we're suffering from structural discrimination in Belgium, and structural discrimination mostly pointed towards people of African descent.
Yeah, we have a responsibility as a society.
Yeah, well, but the problem is that responsibility, you know, is clearly many decades after the end of colonial rule not being necessarily sorted. And this is not something that's confined to Belgium, but we see in many, many former European colonial powers this kind of disparity between essentially first, second, third generation migrants and people who've been here for much longer.
Yes, I mean, there is always going to be that case that people who have moved to the country previously, I mean, you look at the UK, you've got the Windrush scandal, it's not the same, quite the same thing on the same scale as what happened in the Congo. But yes, you're right. I mean, there are major inequalities that exist for populations which have colonial past, and it's very, very difficult to come to terms with those a lot of the time, because quite often people think that it is digging up the past in a way that makes it very uncomfortable for a lot of people who remember it, and they think it causes more problems than it actually does. I personally don't agree with that, but you can see why these things get very messy and difficult.
But ultimately also, we've heard an awful lot of stuff about apologies and that people should apologise. What's the thought process behind that? Does that change things? Does it make people feel better? What's the purpose of an apology?
Well, in a public sort of communication terms, look, I'm not it would be more interesting to put this question to you, actually, because obviously you have direct personal experience to it.
Yeah.
But from a broader perspective, it can be much about humanising something very difficult and horrible that happened in the past. And if this is the first time it's been publicly acknowledged, and it's basically saying, look, we understand what we did. We understand that there are people who live in our country who are Belgian, who've had this horrendous experience in their previous lives. We did this. You know, we're not saying we're ignoring our history. We're opening up and we're going to actually say that we take responsibility. But, as you say, it is what comes next. And if it's only an apology and there isn't the proper scrutiny that gets put in place, and just sort of before, you know, I'd like to hear what you think. You know, if you look at somewhere like Germany after the Nazi period, they have been forensic in putting their own history on the table in terms of looking at it.
Yes,
so, for example, you look at the Bundesbank, they've commissioned
Let's and then we'll come to you.
I mean, to me, first of all, I'd just like to say that apologies should actually, in my perspective, come at the end of a certain process, not in this like kind of intermediary space. And I think apologies without any clear perspective of what's going to happen in the future are almost violent, because they can be used to silence a community. And also, let's be very clear, MR, the party of Charles Michel, was also very apprehensive when the report came out, which you mentioned before. And in that report, the idea was that you have to apologize to the Congolese community, to the Rwandese community, to Burundi's community for colonization. Also, in the same point, we were talking about reparations. That wasn't mentioned in the media. That wasn't mentioned when politicians were talking about it. And I think that's a very important point to make.
Okay, and Mark, just very quickly and finally on this, and I don't want to open a kind of another can of worms, but reparations, and also doesn't Belgium not just have a responsibility, like other colonial powers, to, you know, second or first-generation migrants who've come from places like the Congo, but also to the Congo itself, given the mess it finds itself?
Yes, absolutely. I fully agree. And apologies are indeed one part of the process. With
reparations. With reparations?
We still, if necessary, yes, but we still have to have the debate about it. I mean, when I was a child, I didn't learn the history in the history lessons. We were told that we brought civilization and so on to this part of the world. We weren't taught about the cruelties of Leopold II, who killed millions of people for cash. That's what happened. And when I pass a statue of him here, not far from here, I think of these people, and we should. Yeah, we should come to terms with
Guys, we're really out of time on this, but it is a conversation we're going to carry on your call later on. But for now, I'm afraid we are out of time. It's a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We are going to have to take a quick break at this point. Coming up, though, Tusk on film. The EU Council President makes a splash on Twitter. This is one for you that you're not really going to want to miss. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, populists across the continent are ramping up their campaigns ahead of May's elections. Next week, Matteo Salvini is set to host a gathering of European far-right parties in an attempt to forge a united front. Germany's AfD will be there, and its chief candidate echoes the need for an alliance, but says that nationalist parties are divided on many issues. Jörg Müthen, who's told AFP that there will have to be compromises in the European Parliament, and that there's even more complicated because we have 28 different countries with different approaches. That is certainly one way of putting it. Now, the president of France's National Rally, Marine Le Pen, says that national parties can be united in their diversity. She spoke to Euronews about her ambitions to build a far-right alliance. Let's have a listen.
Parlons de ce point très important, l'après-élection européenne, la volonté de former un groupe certainement plus large que celui que vous avez eu du mal à former en 2014, finalement en 2015. À la faveur de la montée des mouvements nationalistes en Europe, vous espérez un groupe plus large. Est-ce que vous courtisez déjà les nouveaux venus comme Vox, par exemple ?
Nous avons des discussions avec tout le monde. Je veux dire, Matteo Salvini
évidemment.
Fait...
Non, mais il est déjà de votre groupe.
Non, mais c'est pas ça. Mais Matteo Salvini, nous lui avons demandé précisément d'être celui qui un petit peu va courir un peu les capitales européennes, précisément pour essayer de trouver des nouveaux alliés. Nous serons plus nombreux, nous, ça c'est sûr, mais évidemment que nous voulons nous élargir. Et nous avons même, je ne vous le cache pas, l'ambition, ou en tout cas le rêve de pouvoir constituer un très grand groupe des défenseurs des nations, dans lequel on pourrait retrouver une grande partie de ECR, peut-être, de EFDD et de ENL. Ça, c'est vrai que ce serait vraiment quelque chose de très pertinent.
Est-ce que les dérives démocratiques de certains de vos alliés potentiels ne vous dérangent pas? Pensons à Vox. Je parle du cas Vox. Il est assez nouveau sur la scène politique. Il a fait une percée au régional en Andalousie. C'est un parti quand même qui s'appuie sur des thèses très sexistes, qui veut amender la loi sur la protection des violences contre les femmes, qui veut arrêter les avortements, les subventions à l'avortement aux femmes. Enfin, vous, en tant que présidente d'un parti, vous, en tant que femme, comment vous positionnez par rapport à avoir des alliés comme eux?
Mais Madame Vox, pardon, est une scission du Parti populaire. Hein. Donc ils ne viennent pas de je ne sais quel extrémisme. Hein. C'est juste une scission du Parti populaire. Ça dérangeait personne au sein du Parti populaire quand manifestement ces thèses étaient discutées. Donc on voit bien qu'on a quand même une vision qui est encore une fois idéologique. Bon. Mais moi je suis une souverainiste, madame. Moi je suis une démocrate.
Donc à chacun ses affaires.
Mais exactement, je pense que c'est au peuple...
Mais vous voulez bien quand même faire partie du même groupe.
Mais pardon, mais moi je considère que c'est au peuple espagnol de décider pour lui-même. Et si Vox enregistre une spectaculaire montée électorale, c'est probablement que ce qu'il exprime correspond aux préoccupations des Espagnols. Moi, je ne me mêle pas des affaires espagnoles. Et je pense que c'est bien d'ailleurs le problème de l'Union européenne qui, à un moment donné, veut imposer un modèle unique à des pays dont, je suis désolé de le rappeler, sont différents, ont une culture différente, ont une histoire différente. Nous avons certes une culture européenne commune, mais nous avons chacun, encore une fois, des spécificités, une identité, parfois même une identité économique, des points de force, des points de faiblesse. Et Dieu merci, parce qu'on dit unis dans la diversité. Mais dites-moi, elle est où là, aujourd'hui la diversité dans une Union européenne qui veut que tout le monde soit mangé à la même soupe?
And you can catch that full Euronews exclusive interview with Marine Le Pen in Global Conversations tonight at 9:30 p.m. Brussels time here, of course, on Euronews. Joining us to discuss this, some very familiar faces. We've got Maya Petra, William and indeed Laura. Let's talk about what Marine Le Pen had to say there, kind of united in our differences. Can she make, Laura, first of all, this strategy, and it's not just hers, but of kind of trying to unite the right? Will it work?
I think I'll have to dust off my crystal ball to give you a straight answer on that. I don't know. Look, as the interviewer said, she struggled to do it in 2015, 2014, with a much smaller number of people. The thing that we are constantly told this time is that because there's a really serious determination amongst some of these more nationalist right-wing groups that they will sort of put some of their major differences aside and cooperate for the sake of getting power. I think it's very difficult to see whether or not that will actually materialise because, as the head of the AFD, or the main candidate, said, they are very divided in what they think a lot of the time. And one of the reasons why some of these alliances haven't been able to stick together is partly because of voter dislike back in the member states about what their what their representatives might be getting into bed with. So I do think there is something of a tension or a paradox in this idea of an alliance of nationalists at a European level.
Mia Petra, have you found that in Finland too?
Oh, yes, we do have some political forces that might respond to call to be Euro-critical. I think Brexit helped. They are not against or leaving EU, but they want to be more critical, so it resonates in some parties, the true Finns in Finland. But I'm very curious that there was taking up this question of the women, because I've done following for many years now different European opposition parties, kind of the nationalistic right-wing parties. No one wants to support the role of the woman today. If you can find one, I'm very curious. And this is like the clock is ticking backwards in these countries, whether it's abortion, whether it's single mothers, whether it's women carriers. And it's now taken as a symbol of European values. And I'm very sure we do share a lot of values in Europe. We are diverse. There's diversity, but still
William,
there's some common values.
What do you think of that, particularly on the
point? Could we actually go back to what we were talking about, which is political groups in the next European Parliament. The fact of the matter is, the two big groups, the EPP lost 57 seats in the 2014 election. They're on course to lose another 30 or 40 in the next election. The Socialists are going to lose 30 or 40. And the two big groups don't have the popular support they used to have. And the effect of that for the European Parliament, in this sort of bubble that I've been living in for the last 10 years, is that the two big groups won't be able to manage and manipulate the Parliament, run it as a grand coalition, which is in fact what they've been doing. And obviously what happens is that other groups will emerge.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. I think there's, less than 50 days to go until this election. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we're going to stay actually with France because the government there has successfully managed to trip itself up with its own fake news laws. Let's have a look. Welcome to France, a country leading the fight against disinformation. President Emmanuel Macron last year passing anti-fake news laws amid allegations of Russian meddling in the 2017 election. All adverts now need to be transparent about the source of their funding. But fast forward a few months, the French government itself has fallen foul of its own laws. This campaign was released to urge the public to vote in the European Parliament elections. But things didn't go to plan. With Twitter yet to find a way to indicate who's paying for sponsored campaigns, the social network played it safe and blocked the adverts. Taking to, you've guessed it, Twitter, the Interior Minister Christophe Castaner said, Twitter's priority should be to fight content that glorifies terrorism, not campaigns to register on the electoral lists of a democratic republic. With the campaign for the European elections heating up online, this is a standoff which looks likely to return to the headlines. Well, you almost could make that one up. Right, we're going to take another quick break here on Raw Politics. But coming up, if nationalist parties across Europe are divided on so many issues, we want to know if you think the far right will ever unite. You know what to do. It's your call. We want you to pick up the phone and join us at 7 p.m. CET. Call us on 00800 333 3702. You've got no reason not to. It's free. And you get involved in the debate using the hashtag #RawPolitics, either on Twitter or Facebook. Our lines are opening soon, and stay tuned. We're going to be debating some of those topics in just a couple of minutes. OK, well, we've heard from the politicians on all today's big stories, but now it is your turn.
I don't think for the UK it's a good idea at this stage to get out.
Robert, it doesn't seem now that a people's vote, a second referendum, is on the table. So how do you think this could all end?
In chaos.
So the only answer, I think, is to go back to the people. Therefore, I think there should be, for democracy's sake, a second referendum.
Well, we just saw there some of the highlights from last night's Your Call, a lively discussion as always. And once again, we need to hear from you. But before we get stuck in, let's first find out what we're talking about tonight. We are sorry. Belgium's Prime Minister issues an apology on behalf of his country. The segregation and forced adoption of mixed-race children from their mothers during its colonial rule of the Congo. But Belgium is just one of many European countries with a history of colonisation. Should others follow? We want to know, should Europe apologise for its colonial past? The Irish border. It's the fault line which runs through the heart of the Brexit deadlock. Today, Germany's Angela Merkel met with people who live there. As the EU continues preparations for no deal...
So there will be checks. Let's not be mistaken about that.
Uncertainty remains over how to prevent the return of a hard border. We're asking, has the EU done enough to protect Ireland? Preparing for a shake-up, with far-right candidates predicted to make gains in the European elections, Italy's Matteo Salvini is planning to bring together some of Europe's populist parties in a bid to build an alliance. But the alternative for Germany's chief candidate has raised doubts over whether it's possible, and says nationalist parties across the EU are divided on many issues. So we want to know, will the far right ever unite? Have your say. Should Europe apologise for its colonial past? Has the EU done enough to protect Ireland? And will the far right ever unite? All of the contact information is on your screen now. You can phone for free, 00800 333 3702. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics if you're on Facebook or Twitter. Email rawpol@euronews.com. And you can even Skype us if you so want. The handle is rawpolitics. Well, now, joining us to discuss this, we've got Jack Parrott, who is the Brussels correspondent for Euronews and is hosting it tonight for the first time. Welcome to the Raw Politics sofa. We also got William Dartmouth. He is a British MEP, and Laura Shields is back with us as well. Good evening to you all. Jack, let's start off with you since you're hosting. This is a big topic, isn't it, this colonial past? Rather interesting discussion we've just had on the programme, but it's not something that's just confined to Belgium. This is an issue that other countries in Europe are having to grapple with.
It is indeed the United Kingdom, for instance, all over Europe. It's very specific to Belgium, though, in the sense that it is a moment that is happening here. We saw in Brussels the Africa Museum recently was redone. They changed their exhibits to try and deal with it, but still a lot in the Congolese community said that it didn't go far enough. This is another area where Belgium is clearly trying to do it, the government, but not always hitting the mark with the African communities.
But it's a really divisive subject, though, isn't it, William? Because lots of people don't feel very comfortable talking with it, talking about it.
I think that's true, but from memory, the first person to apologise was, of course, Tony Blair. But he apologised for the UK's participation in the slave trade. I would have preferred it if Tony Blair had apologised for UK's participation in the Iraq War, which he did have something to do with.
No, but you're not to this point that, you know, whatever country you go to in Europe, there is this disparity, there is this difference, quite a big gap between kind of essentially migrant communities from former colonial powers and the people who have been there for much longer. And that needs to be addressed.
Yes, it does need to be addressed. But I'm not sure that politicians posturing is the right way necessarily to address it. How else could it got to be sincerely done?
Is it posturing, though?
It's posturing if it doesn't lead to anything. I mean, I think apology...
But is even apology just posturing? Because I wouldn't say it is.
No, I don't think it is. But I think it has to be heartfelt. I do think it does need to usually lead to something else. And on top of that, I think it also, you know, you have to question the motives for doing it at the point at which it happens. Now, I'm not for a minute impugning Charles Michel's reason for doing it today, but I think that if the apology isn't heartfelt and it doesn't sort of lead to something that, you know, it sets up an expectation of something else. If that doesn't then follow through, I do think it can leave the communities that have been affected disappointed.
Heartfelt, though, is difficult. How do you judge what a heartfelt apology is?
Well, you're right,
but isn't it a bit late from Mr.
Guys,
Michel?
we're going to have this conversation in a couple of minutes' time on your call. We want to know what you think, though, as well. It's not just confined to Belgium, of course. I think Mexico was demanding an apology from Spain last week. Do you agree? Should there be money? We want to know your views. Give us a call, 00800 333 3702. Send us an email at rawpol@euronews.com. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, hashtag #RawPolitics, or you can search for us on Skype. But now it is time for tonight's Raw Moment, which features a blockbuster-style film released by Donald Tusk to celebrate, well, himself. The European Council President has made a film to mark his reaching 1 million followers on Twitter. So let's all sit back, relax, grab some popcorn and gaze in wonder at the starring role that Big Don Tusk plays on the world stage.
We already know.
Now, I'm not entirely sure that's going to be an Oscar winner, but he does do it well when he does it.
Does what? You see, I'm not sure I actually like the film
really?
that much. No.
I like The Wave.
I like Tusk, but I like Tusk when he's a bit cranky and he sort of makes some acerbic comments. I mean, obviously, we might fall out over this, but I enjoyed his, you know, 7th place in hell or special place in hell comment. This is a bit too smooth.
Too smooth. In saying that, what's it? Donald Trump's got 50-odd million.
55.
Jean-Claude Juncker, though, behind on 700,000, so he's got some work to do. That is all we've got time for on Raw Politics tonight. As I say, though, stay tuned for your call. We want your views on that. Tessa is back on Monday, but from me and all the team, thanks for watching. Stay tuned to your call, and goodbye for now.